Hi there, everyone. Welcome to the Daily Gardener. I'm your host, Jennifer Eveling. It's the 19th of April. Does your garden have a signature plant? If you can't decide, maybe it's time to let your garden do the talking. Complete the following sentence. My garden has the perfect spot to grow. You fill in the blank. For instance, you might have the perfect spot to grow anemone. I remember going to my friend Carmen's house in the spring. I came around the corner and stopped in my tracks when I saw her happy anemones. So cheerful, so vibrant, and so demanding. Not everyone can grow anemones, but Carmen's garden had the perfect spot for them. And even though anemones are pretty ephemeral, I always think of them as her signature plant. Here's today's brevities. Today is National Garlic Day. It's observed every year on April 19th. Garlic, or stinking rose, is a member of the lily family. Onions, leeks, and shallots are also in the family. This time of year, wild garlic, or ransoms, are returning to the woodlands, hedgerows, and riverbanks. Wild garlic is also called bear's garlic. Folklore says that bears eat it after hibernation, and if cows graze on wild garlic, it will taint the milk with garlic flavor. Garlic is also used for medicinal purposes. Garlic has antibiotic properties, and it helps reduce blood pressure and cholesterol. Gilroy, California is known as the garlic capital of the world, and Will Rogers said this about Gilroy. It's the only place in America where you can marinate a steak just by hanging it out on a clothesline. Atlas Obscura wrote an article last year about Gilroy. They featured Gilroy's unique recipes for garlic ice cream, saying, "This dessert divides ice cream lovers." An online reviewer mediated the matter with this comment. Actually, the garlic ice cream is pretty good, but a little does go a long way. The Gilroy Garlic Festival is held every year in July. On this day in 1889, E. Lucy Braun was born. The E stood for Emma, but she always went by Lucy. In 1950, Braun was the first woman elected president of the Ecological Society of America. A quiet, bright, and dedicated field scientist, she worked as a botanist at the University of Cincinnati. Braun became interested in the outdoors as a child. Growing up on May Street in Cincinnati, her parents would take Lucy and her older sister Annette by horse-drawn streetcar to the woods in Rose Hill. The girls were taught to identify wildflowers. In turn, the girls helped gather specimens for their mother's herbarium. And the girls both got PhDs, Lucy in botany and Annette in zoology. And they never married. However, they lived together their entire lives. Friends of Braun have recounted, she loved to be out in the field. Rain wouldn't stop her. She could walk forever. Lucy Braun said, "Only through close and reverent examination of nature can humans understand and protect its beauties and wonders." By the time she died, Lucy had collected nearly 12,000 specimens for her own personal herbarium. She drove over 65,000 miles during a 25-year quest throughout the eastern United States. Her heart belonged to the forests, and her book, Deciduous Forests of Eastern North America, is still regarded as a definitive text. When asked about her time in the field, Braun would happily recount how she managed to dodge moonshiner stills in the hills of Kentucky, gathering up plant samples unseen by the botanists of her time. When she died of heart failure in March of 1971, she was one of the top 3 ecologists in the United States. And her herbarium? It was acquired by the Smithsonian National Museum in Washington, D.C. On this day in 1792, naturalist Gilbert White wrote in his journal, "Daffodils are gone. Mountain snowdrops and hyacinth in bloom, the latter very fine. Fritillaries going." Then 4 years later, in 1796, sowed holly-hocks, columbines, and sweet williams. Today is Primrose Day. Primrose Day commemorates the death date of Queen Victoria's favorite Prime Minister, Benjamin Disraeli. His favorite flower was the primrose, and the name comes from the Latin primus, meaning first rose. In 1889, London newspapers were reporting the number of primrose poems they had received. In 1884, when the competition started, only 77 poems were sent in. By 1890, they predicted there would be 1,000 competitors. On April 30th, 1947, a little primrose verse was printed in the Chicago Tribune. A primrose by a river's brim is not a rose, nor is it prim. American writer Nancy Cardozo wrote a poem called Primroses and Prayers. Here it is. This is a primrose morning. The wind has put up her hair. The bells hung in my cherry tree are still. No birds feast there. I walked up the noon hill, saddest of prim things. I met a fair child selling bunches of butterfly wings. I gave him a painted ball for a mist bouquet. Now flitter ghosts put wings on all I do or say. Today's book recommendation is brand new for 2019. It's called The Hidden Horticulturist, and it's by Fiona Davison. Davison worked at the Royal Horticultural Society's library, and she stumbled on a collection of handwritten letters that dated all the way back to 1822. The letters had been written by young gardeners, including one from Joseph Paxton. In any case, Fiona traces the lives of these young gardeners. It's a delightful read, and you can find a link for purchasing the book over in the show notes for this episode at thedailygardener.org. For today's garden chore, it's another Photo Friday in the garden. Today, take pictures of all the stuff in your garden. Skip the plants. Focus on the statuary, the fountains, the signage. When you review your photos, look at them with discernment. Evaluate the tangible items you've added to your garden. Over time, our gardens can become repositories. Just because something says garden doesn't mean it has to go in your garden. Finally, here's something sweet to revive the little botanic spark in your heart. Prime Minister Benjamin Disraeli was also dubbed the Earl of Beaconsfield. After he died, there was a little story that made the rounds in the papers called The Beaconsfield and the Primrose. I'll paraphrase it here. Disraeli's fondness for the primrose originated from the time when he was living in Highbury, London. Here, he was much attached to a young lady. A ball was held, and the young lady in question wore a wreath of primroses. A bet was made for a pair of gloves between Mr. Disraeli and another gentleman as to whether the primroses were real or not. Turns out the primroses were real. Disraeli got the gloves, and the lady, she gave a few primroses to the future Prime Minister. Thanks for listening to The Daily Gardener, and remember, for a happy, healthy life, garden every day. The Daily Gardener is produced weekdays in lovely Maple Grove, Minnesota. You can find complete show notes over at thedailygardener.org, and be sure to share the show with your garden friends. You can find The Daily Gardener on all your favorite social media, Instagram, Twitter, and Pinterest, and of course, Facebook. While you're over at Facebook, don't forget to join the Daily Gardener community. Just search for these 3 words, Daily Gardener Community. The group will pop right up and then request to join. Finally, I want to thank my team at Podfly Productions, where my fabulous editor is Eric Begay. Have a great day in the garden, and we'll see you tomorrow.